Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the youngest player in the NBA. As a matter of fact, he was so young that he turned 19 on his NBA debut. Aleksej Pokusevski. That's the only time I'm going to say his name in the video because I don't want to mispronounce it at any point. But he is easily a diamond in the rough. Going into the draft, many teams weren't willing to take a chance on him because he was definitely a project player going in. I would compare him a little bit to Sekou Doumbouya last year for the Pistons, except with him it was even more certain he was going to be a project player, and for most teams, they were not willing to draft a player like Poku, who was going to have to take years and years of development in the G League to eventually become that player for you as hopefully a young star. However, there's the OKC Thunder, who are by far the most patient team in the NBA. You look at their coach, Daigneault, you talk about their coach, Daigneault, who was in the G League coaching young players like Poku for years, and then he comes into the NBA and is one of the youngest coaches. And not only that, but the Thunder's entire roster is young players like Poku. And sure, a lot of these players aren't going to be actual NBA starters, but there is a handful of them that are going to be very quality rotation players, at the very least for OKC, if they can continue to develop them. And I think they can. Talk about what they've done so far this year, not only giving players minutes, but giving them offensive responsibilities. These players are going to have all the opportunities in the world to become the players we hope they would become through the draft. There's undrafted players like Lou Dort and Moses Brown. Then from last year's draft, they have Ty Jerome and Isaiah Roby, and then this year they have Poku and Theo Maledon. And all 6 of those players this year have shown bright spots for OKC. Now, when compared to other young cores, they're not as polished as most, but they're headed by Shai-Gilgeous-Alexander. And if the Thunder were a playoff team this year, he would have easily been voted an all-star. This year he's putting up 24 points a game and 6 assists, and if he had more shooters around him, he would probably be getting upwards to 8 or 9 assists per game. But in today's video, we're not talking as much about the OKC Thunder as we are Aleksej Pokusevski. Essentially, in 2K, if you want to build a demigod, that's what Aleksej is. He can not only handle for a 7-footer, he could shoot like a guard, he could play make like a guard, and he could take the ball up the floor off of rebounds like he's Ben Simmons. And on top of all that, he doesn't really have any ego. Like most other European players, he's selfless and he makes really good decisions, and he has a high basketball IQ. And that's what really reminds me of Nikola Jokic. When looking at the two of these players, they're both incredibly selfless and they like to get their teammates involved. And when they sent Poku to the G League, he showed off his entire passing repertoire. He was making behind the back, no-look passes, and he had all the confidence in the world. And this was clutch because in his first 15 games in the NBA, we could tell he wasn't ready. He was a bit hesitant to take the ball up the court, which is reasonable considering he was an 18-year-old. And because of that, he wasn't truly himself. And he didn't even go to the foul line one time as a big man in the first 15 games he played in, which goes to show he wasn't necessarily as confident as he is right now. Now, in these last 10 games since the G League ended, he's only been getting to the foul line 2 times a game, but there have been games where he's been getting to the foul line consistently, and that goes to show the impact of sending young players to the G League. We saw with the Toronto Raptors, with all the young players they have were developing in the G League, which really helped them propel themselves in the NBA because they had so much more confidence when they came back. And the same can be said with the OKC Thunder. You could say about Ty Jerome, who has played very well this year, shooting great from 3. You could say about Moses Brown, who's not necessarily the most talented player, but he has all the tools of being a really good defensive center. And now we're going to be talking about Aleksej because he has all those traits that are going to need some time to develop. But once the Thunder can harvest his actual skill set, he's going to be so dynamic for them offensively. You talk about Shai developing as a playmaker and a 3-point shooter. Those two could run, pick, and pop. And like I mentioned before, he's a 7-footer who could handle. It reminds me of Jaren Jackson Jr., but he's an even better passer at just 19 years old. He could be the guard to initiate a pick and roll or even a pick and pop scenario with one of their other players, and that makes him offensively a low-key demigod. Even a player like Nikola Jokic, who we talk about being so dynamic and unique, can't do those two things himself. So when you really look at it from that perspective, he is one of the most unique centers we have ever seen coming into the NBA. And that's just on the offensive side of the ball, because defensively, he has potential as well. Defensively, he's not perfect, but he has the length to contest shots and close out on shooters better than just about any other center in the NBA. And he has the footwork, which I didn't get into enough of offensively because in the G League, he was using that to his advantage. But his footwork only helps him defensively if he gets switched out onto a guard on the perimeter. And given his length, he's a really good shot blocker already. And I like to assume with him getting more experience in the NBA, he's only going to improve as a defender and a shot blocker. career. Now, Poku is far from a perfect prospect. His physical stature is going to hold him back if he doesn't put on weight. He's going to have the strength and conditioning coaches he didn't have overseas, and he should put on more muscle. And on top of that, he may grow even more given the fact that he's only 19 years old. And like guards, he could pull up and knock down mid-range shots and hit threes. He has the form and the confidence, and as he grows and matures as an NBA player and makes more mistakes, given the offensive responsibilities OKC's giving him, he's going to improve and be more consistent offensively. He's about 190 right now, and I'm sure he's going to put on more weight, and if he could get to 210, 215 in 2 years, that's only going to help him as a rebounder and defensively playing against guys in the interior. And that's really his biggest weakness, because everything else is just inconsistencies in his game. But with age, those inconsistencies aren't going to be as relevant. And like I said before, this is a player that we knew was going to be a project coming into the league. So right now he's shooting 31% from the field, but most of those attempts are outside shots. And he's playing on a team that doesn't have too much floor spacing, so that makes the offense more clogged and harder for a guy like him. And with him fitting perfectly the timeline of OKC, I know for sure they're only going to give him more and more opportunities this season and years going forward. We saw them roll out Al Horford for the rest of the season until they could find a trade for him, which is very telling of what OKC is trying to do, because Al Horford is a positive impact player in the NBA. I don't care how old he is or how much he's getting paid. So for the OKC Thunder to say you're not playing for the rest of the year, we'll find a trade for you in the summer, goes to show their confidence in these young players and the fact that they believe in them and want to develop them to see how much they can improve going forward. So in future years, they could surround them with more guards like Shai, who are going to add more shooting and playmaking to improve their offense. And Mark Daigneault is just 35, so he's going to be around in the long run for OKC. So I could see them establishing a system that's going to play into the favor of Aleksej, where he's not going to have to adjust much throughout his career. We've seen players that are similar to him, like Bol Bol, but those players didn't even have the same skill set as him in terms of his actual passing ability. And unlike them, he's getting the responsibilities they weren't granted when they came to the NBA, because a guy like Bol Bol walked into Denver where they were trying to make the playoffs. Meanwhile, Poku's on a team that's trying to develop their talent, and they're still competitive. And I'm gonna be honest, he's a player I'm rooting for, because we don't see players like this often come into the NBA. And I love the fit of him and Shai as they continue to develop together. And even though the SGA fan club can be a bit too much at times, I have a strong faith that he could be a franchise player, and a guy like Poku could be a solid complementary number 3 option on a championship level team. All he has to do is really put on the weight, which I'm fairly confident he will. And in OKC, he is in the perfect system to grow and develop as a player, and I think his potential is going to be maxed out there because of that. But we have a long way to go until he gets there. So you guys let me know in the comments down below what you think his ceiling is in today's league. And also, if you want to subscribe and you haven't already, feel free to do so to see more content on the NBA like this. Like the video because it'd be greatly appreciated. And as always, until next time, peace and have a great day.